If your pipeline feels harder to predict than it was 2 years ago, if you find that your client's buying behavior has shifted, you're not imagining it. So we are entering what the World Bank has called the world's economy's weakest decade of growth since the 1960s. And speaking of the 1960s, we are actually entering a period and to be honest, quite firmly entrenched in a period of market volatility, the likes of which we haven't seen since the 60s. So the reality is that between, in the last sort of 3 decades, notwithstanding, there was a period of incredible market stability. But in the last decade, we have really stepped into a period of colossal volatility, and it is starting to catch up and exhaust small business owners. And you might be one of them. You are probably starting to feel the ground shifting. You may find that revenue is fine, like you're making money, but you can feel the ground moving. And specifically, you may be finding that clients are taking longer to sign deals. Your pipeline is thinner than it was 6 months ago or 2 years ago. You may be having that 10 p.m. conversation or 2 a.m. conversation, which is, hey, I have a huge client here. If they left, what would happen? And your instinct might be to start pulling back, to spend less, to wait it out, to do things yourself where you might have hired a team member to do it. And that instinct is going to feel very responsible. It's going to feel like a smart move. And in today's episode, I want to talk about why that instinct, the instinct to pull back, the instinct to stop allocating capital, to button down the hatches, to cut, all of those things. I'm going to talk about why for women running service businesses at 200K to 2 million, why, while it feels like a protective move, it's actually not protection. It's actually one of the fastest ways to increase your structural exposure to the exact conditions you are trying to protect yourself from. I'm not going to try to motivate you. I'm not going to tell you to be brave. That's not what I'm about. I'm actually going to walk you through the structural mechanics of what happens inside a founder-dependent business when the founder herself shifts into protection mode. And then I'm going to share the counterintuitive move that looks like risk, but actually functions as insurance. So if you're resonating with the conditions that I'm talking about, stay listening. All right. So I want to kick off by identifying 2 postures. As a CEO, you're going to have a posture, right? And we think about posture as like sitting or standing with a nice straight back, chin up, all of that. Well, there are leadership postures as well. And as a CEO, what the current global economy is doing and the kind of volatility that we're seeing, whether you read the news every day or not, it kind of doesn't matter. You are still operating inside of a highly volatile global economy. And as a CEO, it is having an impact on how you're showing up. And so what's happening right now is CEOs are basically adopting one of 2 postures. And I'll use the term postures and modes. And what's interesting is most founders, it's not like you're absolutely adopting one of these postures, but the question is, are you aware of it? And are you aware that you have switched postures? So posture number 1 or mode number 1 is growth mode. And so when you're in growth mode, your unifying emotion, your unifying question, your unifying impetus is about how you reach the next level. You're thinking about, how do I build more leverage? Where am I going to invest next to get more growth? That's growth mode. You're obsessed with next level. What's next? It's future leaning. Protection mode is the other mode, or the protection posture. And in protection posture, your number 1 preoccupation is, how do I hold what I have? What can I cut? What can I pause? How can I preserve what I've built? Neither of these 2 postures is wrong. Both are completely natural. The problem is that most founders don't consciously notice when they have shifted. And I think that's the key. And that's, one of the reasons that I'm doing this episode is to make sure that you are intentional about the position that you're in. To quote the great Dolly Parton, success is about knowing who you are and doing it on purpose. So let's start by identifying how to know if you're in protection mode. So you know that you're in protection mode if you're starting to review all of your costs. This is why typically in protection oriented, when there's high volatility, when a CEO is in protection mode, the CFO typically rules, right? In growth mode, the sales leader or the chief revenue officer typically rules. So in protection mode, you're reviewing every line item. You are probably delaying a key hire that you know you need. That's been a big one for me in the past when I was unconsciously in protection mode. It was actually very counterintuitive and cost me close to $1 million. That's a story for another day. You told yourself to give it a month before making a decision. So you're delaying decisions. You have probably pulled back on marketing and outreach. And you may say, I'm just going to buckle down and do this myself. So you're taking things back onto your plate. And the reality is every single one of those feels prudent. And the instinct is rational. And the challenge is that it's actually designed for the wrong architecture. So I hear these words, and our team, we hear this, like we work with hundreds of entrepreneurs every year, talk to nearly 1,000 women founders and women-led businesses each and every year. And we hear these words and we hear this language. So the instinct, again, I repeat, it is perfectly rational. And it's a completely reasonable response to the current environment. We've got things like tariffs globally. We have clients tightening their budgets. We have sales cycles lengthening. We have a war in the Middle East. The problem is not the instinct. The problem is that it was designed for a different kind of business than the one you are running. What? What are you talking about, Eleanor? How could, I'm a one-woman show, or I'm a woman with a small team. How can not, leaning into hiring, not leaning into investing in marketing, not leaning into allocating capital strategically, how could that possibly not be for a business like mine? Well, let's talk about it. Protection instincts are largely borrowed from employment. So in a salaried role, it's not only that it's fixed both ways, right? So it's fixed potentially on the upside. So your salary is your salary and you have an earning cap, but it's also fixed on the downside, my friend, which means unlike an entrepreneur who, if your sales collapse one month, you made way less money, than another month. That's not how it works in employment. Your salary is fixed. And so you don't get as much exposure to the upside, but you certainly don't get as much exposure to the downside. So in a salaried role, pulling back, curbing expenditures during uncertainty is totally legitimate. You still get paid, and your institution, your organization itself is absorbing the risk. But in a founder-dependent service business, and I would argue that the vast majority of people listening to the Woman-Owned podcast remain in a founder-dependent service business, meaning if you stepped away for 2 months, your business it may collapse, right? When you're in a founder-dependent service business, that logic inverts completely. When you pull back, you're not conserving. You're removing the only support from the only pipeline that exists because you are the pipeline. Now, I have experienced this when my business was more founder-dependent. When I started removing supports, delaying hires, delaying decisions, not leaning into growth because I wanted to really manage cash. And I was worried and I was afraid and I was focused on, protection. The single biggest thing that was impacted was pipeline. I actually had to take on more work because I wasn't investing in help. I was doing that work, so I wasn't marketing. My pipeline was volatile, highly volatile. I was having cash flow. I was actually harming the business by not spending enough, by not deciding quickly enough. And there is a gender component here because women are traditionally raised to protect against downside much more than our male counterparts who are much more asked to future paint and to talk about possibility, whereas we tend to be educated to protect. So I want to give you some examples of this inversion. You might cancel marketing initiatives to save money. You might not attend trade shows and events to save money. You might not do a speaking engagement because they're not paying you and you would have to invest money to go there. But marketing is the only thing generating the awareness that produces the calls that produce revenue. So you might be saving $2,500 to attend that conference, but you are costing yourself $25,000 in potential deal flow that you can facilitate by being in the right room. And you can see in the moment, this might feel like a very logical, oh, cash flow is tight. I don't know if I'm going to go to that conference. But the conferences are where you meet the people who create the deal flow that solve your cash flow issue. And this is the different, like as a founder, to truly protect yourself, you need to read both sides of the ledger. It's not just what it's costing you, but it's the opportunity cost of not doing it. And a truly skilled founder is really able to visualize, monetize, and understand opportunity cost. And this is how she creates the structural thing so she doesn't keep getting caught in that flywheel. So the problem is, let's say you canceled that marketing initiative or you didn't go to that conference. 90 days later, you don't have a marketing problem. You have a revenue problem, friend. And you won't connect the two because the cause happened 3 months earlier than the effect. So let's talk about another one. You delay the hire. So you need to make a key hire and you delay it to see where revenue lands. I've 100% done this and it cost me a lot of money. It's painful. But the hire was supposed to free you from delivery so you could do the business development, but you wanted to save the money. Without the hire, you finish one contract. That's great. And then you start from zero in the pipeline again. That delay, your unwillingness to invest because you were in the protective posture, that delay guaranteed that the cycle repeats itself. Let's talk about another example. You decide, I'm just going to do this myself. I'm not going to get that contractor. I'm not going to, invest in that advisory. I'm just going to do this myself. But yourself means you're simultaneously the sales system, the delivery system, the operations system, and the strategy system. And when the market shifts, and you're not investing in the help you need, you're doing it yourself, all of that lands on one person. There is zero buffer between you and the market conditions every business owner right now is dealing with. So that's how the steps that we take as founder-dependent business owners that we think are protecting us actually create much more downside exposure. But the challenge is that I think a lot of times women are educated and conditioned to only read the cost side of the ledger, not the effect side of the ledger. And that is true CEO development. So the moves that can feel like protection are the moves that increase founder dependency at the exact moment that founder dependency is the primary vulnerability. I'm going to say it one more time. The moves that feel like protection to you are the moves that increase founder dependency at the exact moment that founder dependency is your primary vulnerability. If you cannot attend conferences, build those networks, if you cannot market and stay on your prospects shortlist, if you are so trapped in delivery and cheaping out on not getting the support that you need, that it means that 90 days from now, again, you're not going to have a marketing problem. You're going to have a major revenue problem that's worse than it is right now. And you won't connect, hey, this is because of the investments I didn't make, because by that time, they're 90 days in the past. So again, what I want to articulate here is it's not that you're making bad decisions as a CEO. It's that the instincts that you're deploying are actually designed for institutional employment. And they are being like the same decisions that maybe your parents made who weren't founders or people around you make who aren't founders. Your entire decision-making lens has to look different because your operational context is completely different. And, with respect, you may be continuing to pull that kind of decision-making lens forward. And it's the complete wrong decision-making lens when you're an entrepreneur. So the counterintuitive move here is that real protection is structural. It looks like an investment. It's not conservation. And again, I have done work around this, that looks at how, so for instance, when VC investors are doing their Q&As with women-led businesses and male-led businesses, they will ask the men, tell me about your future vision. They ask a lot of questions that take a look at what's the potential upside. With women, they'll ask a ton of questions about what are the risks, how are we preparing for them, et cetera, et cetera. There's a big body of research that takes a look at how women are really conditioned to control spending, whereas men are much more conditioned to allocate capital. And the challenge is that inside an entrepreneurial system, there are times when cost control is key, but a business needs it, just like you and I eat food, a business eats money. You cannot starve your business of money. If you starve your business of money, it cannot grow. And during challenging economic times, you have to make sure that your business is properly fed. You have to make sure that you're making those investment decisions. And it may feel, you will register that as a loss of cash. That's because you're still in an employee type of mindset. It is not a loss of cash. It is an investment in growth. This is not semantics. It's not like I'm not trying to feed you a word salad here. What I'm actually sharing is that it is a fundamentally different posture to think about strategic allocation of capital versus having a very, I'm going to call it, it's a very unstrategic way of looking at capital, that all the money that goes out of your business, when you register it as a loss, that's not typically CEO behavior. There are times when you should do it and it's rational, but if that is your fundamental posture, you're actually exposing yourself and your business to much more risk. So the actual protection often is the opposite of what your instincts are telling you. So let's give you 3 different examples of what structural protection actually looks like. So structural protection number 1, and I think, this is one of the most important ones, is a selling system, even a basic one, a defined process, a weekly cadence, a way to understand how much volume is in your pipeline. This is key because if and when your biggest client leaves, you have a pipeline behind them. You have a clear and documented way of building that pipeline. You are not starting from zero. You are not panicking. Thing number 2 is going to be another structural example of a structural protection is some form of packaged offers with recurring revenue built in. So retainers, monthly engagements, switching to defined scope instead of hourly. When this is in place, it means your revenue doesn't disappear the month a project ends. There's a floor underneath you. And I think installing monthly recurring revenue offerings is one of the most important and protective things a founder can do. And it's so interesting. I was talking to a founder recently who's, for a few months, she's been feeling really concerned. She sees what's happening in the marketplace. She's concerned. And she has been thinking about installing monthly recurring revenue. She's been thinking about it. A month passes. I ask her, have you done anything on this? No. Another month. Have you done anything on this? No. Another month. An entire quarter passes with no action on monthly recurring revenue. So I want to share 2 things that you're seeing. Number 1, delayed action. Delaying decisions and having too many things be in I should, that's classic protection mode. And being in that, you think you're being prudent. You don't want to introduce too many things. You don't want to open up too many loops. Great. But what you've just held yourself back from is actually instituting a core piece of structure to help you protect cash flow in your business, and it hasn't happened. The key, of course, the other thing is when you have these things in place, I've looked inside hundreds of businesses, and what is much more normal is not for a retainer to get eliminated. It's when budgets tighten, it's for the scope to be re-explored. So you're still retaining money, right? They feel great because they don't have to pay as much, but you still have that baseline of sales, which is key. Okay, one more. Let's talk about the founder who builds infrastructure before she thinks She needs it. So maybe your pipeline hasn't been impacted yet. That's great. So let's look forward. Do you have the team that you need in place? Are they operating at the altitude that you need? Are they a second order team? They can drive decisions. They can truly free you up. They can reduce your cognitive load. Or are they a first order team? A first order team just executes. You have to decide everything. That's a very vulnerable place for a leader to be in because you are the cognitive pinwheel in the business. You want to be making growth decisions as much as possible. Like as a CEO, your job is to make growth decisions. It's going to be much easier to do it when business is still coming in, not after it stops. So you're not being reckless. You are doing the most structurally intelligent thing that's available to you. Infrastructure, you guys, is not a growth expense. Infrastructure is insurance. Women who are building during uncertain markets come out of downturns with businesses that are stronger, businesses that capture much more market share, and businesses that really, there's a great article in the Harvard Business Review talking about the businesses who did the things, made the kinds of investments that they needed to during downturns, roared out of recessions. They didn't just survive, they roared out of recessions, really positioning yourself for growth. Now, I want to clarify what I'm not saying here. I am absolutely not talking about spending recklessly. I am a money person and conservative with cash to a degree. I'm not talking about hiring 10 people because someone told you to scale. If this is what you're thinking that I'm saying, this is not, please re-listen to the episode. I am talking about structural investments, structural pieces that make your business less dependent on you. They make you less exposed to conditions, and they make your business less volatile month to month. In 2026, more than at any other time in your company's history, we're dealing with extremely high levels of volatility right now. And a prudent CEO is protecting herself against that volatility, not by battening down the hatches, not at all, but by adopting a very intelligent growth posture, which sort of merges growth posture with protective posture. And in protective posture, you are making those strategic investments in infrastructure that reduce the business's exposure on you. You are the pipeline. You are the golden goose. Your ability to process, to deliver, if you don't have bandwidth, you are hamstringing and putting a chokehold on your business's availability, not only to grow,